first big decisions of the new president will face is naming a justice to replace late Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia. Scalia's death back in February has left the court with a 4-4 conservative-liberal split, leaving many cases hanging in the balance.
And here to talk about what the Trump presidency could mean for the court is Professor Joshua Wilson from the University of Denver. So we're delighted to have you here today. We know that Mr. Trump has said already he wants a pro-life justice to move into the U.S. Supreme Court. How quickly do you think that would happen?
Yeah, it's going to take a little while just in terms of he already has some lists out that he said that he was going to choose exclusively from those lists. But it'll still take a little bit of time to narrow that down, get the one specific person, and then go through the whole confirmation process. So it'll still be a few months.
Is there anything that Democrats would or should do to return the favor of what Republicans have done?
So it would be very hard for them to say that they're going to follow through on, no, the next president should decide, as the Republicans said, because we have 4 years. And really, they're in a really difficult bind of deciding what to do, not just with this federal judge appointment, but with all kind of federal judicial appointments, in terms of how much can they resist, how much will they resist, and will that come at any political cost for them?
Because you're saying that really it's the federal court level that where we'll really see change happening? Yeah.
So there are quite a few vacancies, a little over 100 vacancies throughout the whole federal judiciary. So we tend to focus specifically on the Supreme Court for good reasons. But when we look at roughly 1/8 of the federal bench is open, and that a President-elect Trump will have a legislature that's going to work with him, he should be able to fill quite a bit of the federal judiciary in relatively short order.
What are some of the more key federal cases that people may just have assumed it was always the Supreme Court that had a hand in it, but clearly if it's in front of the Supreme Court, a federal court heard it first? But what are some of the most recent key cases?
Well, so one big one, you're talking about abortion politics, and so the Supreme Court came down with a really substantial ruling regarding Texas's moves to limit abortion access. The Supreme Court struck those down, but now it's going to really be up to the lower federal courts to figure out how broadly or how narrowly they're going to interpret that case and apply it. And so I'd expect, back in June, I would have said that anti-abortion activists really were on the outs. Now with the Trump presidency, there's a whole new set of political opportunities, so I'd expect that to come back.
And what other issues do you think are most pressing?
Well, voting rights is going to be a really substantial thing to look at. Another thing is maybe the GOP will look to try to strengthen Citizens United in some capacity, maybe strike down some more regulations around campaign finance. I wouldn't expect that, obviously the Affordable Care Act is going to be off the table now. Immigration will probably slip to the legislature, so will Second Amendment cases. We'd probably see public sector unions coming back in the line of fire. So those are some of the things that
When you say voting rights, what do you mean?
Well, the Supreme Court has done a little bit to dismantle the Voting Rights Act in the last few years, and I would expect there to be more voting rights cases coming up. So as states, for example, try to push things like voter ID laws and so forth, which has been challenged in the courts, if we're getting this change in the judiciary that's going to be more friendly to this, you might see more cases around that, and also trying to just more narrowly construe the Voting Rights Act.
How is it that so many vacancies have existed this long, and there's really no consequence to it except just the waiting game?
Yeah.
That doesn't seem like is there no law preventing that from happening?
No, so the Republicans have been very, very good at dragging their feet. So, as I said, there's just over 100 vacancies right now. Obama had just over 50 judges in the process of being confirmed, but Republicans have really, in controlling the Senate, have really slowed down the confirmation process, and now they're going to reap the benefits of that. Essentially, those 50-something judges that were in the process of being confirmed, they're all dead in the water, right? So we'll go back to 100 and something. So
we know the justices on the High Court are hoping to have a full court here soon so they can make some decisions. So here's what Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg said during an appearance early last week.
Most immediately, our vacancy will be filled. Now, that's not true of every president. Jimmy Carter never had a Supreme Court vacancy to fill. But there is an existing vacancy, and then President Trump will fill it. Then perhaps Congress will do some work. One of the reasons why the court hasn't had as many petitions as usual is that there hasn't been any legislative activity.
Well, justices have been known to time their departures, perhaps, based on political timing and who might be president. Are there going to be justices now rethinking their retirement? I guess liberal justices rethinking their retirement plans?
Yeah, so it's natural to start with Ginsburg as the person that you would say would be rethinking any retirement plans. She's the oldest justice on the court, if I remember correctly. And now there's a question of can you hold out for 4 more years or not? And then there are 2 other justices right around 80 years old as well.
Is there a risk of staying too long on the bench?
Well, there's a risk in terms of kind of diminished capacity, right? Like you have to, if you're going to stay on the bench, you still have to be able to function on the bench. By all accounts, though, Ruth Bader Ginsburg is, quite a spry 83-year-old. But that's one of the risks of basically its capacity.
How many seats do you foresee in 4 years being filled?
So that's the huge question right now. So we know that President-elect Trump will be able to appoint 1 Supreme Court justice, and that has various effects. But if he's able to get 2 Supreme Court justices, then that opens up whole new territories in terms of what can be done in the court. So, for example, people have worried about Roe versus Wade. If he gets 2 justices, that could change the calculation there. Affirmative action appears to be safe right now in terms of the court, but if he gets 2 justices, that changes there. And we could have upwards to 3 more justices who retire or pass away in the next 4 years.
So we're holding on for the ride to
Yeah,
see what a Trump presidency brings
It's
on
all a
many
big
levels.
question. Yeah.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
Josh.
much.
You're welcome.
We'll be right back.